We're back with all the DIY coaches today, and we're going to have a roundtable discussion. Today, what I want to talk about is something that comes up pretty regularly when we're coaching parents, and that's dinner. So, dinner is that one meal in the day where everybody's home, everyone's tired from a long day, and no one knows what to make. What I hear a lot from parents is, how do I stay on track with my nutrition without turning dinner into a second job? And my kids won't like what I'm eating. So, do I make two meals where I make one for myself and my spouse and then another for the kids? Or do I force them to eat what we're eating? If they don't like what I'm eating, are they eating poorly? And if I let them have something different, am I setting a standard for something that I'm going to regret later down the road? Or maybe your kids have allergies or food intolerances, or maybe it's just hard to get them to eat anything. So, realistically speaking, I think this is something that pretty much all of us have dealt with or continue to navigate as parents. So, what I'd like to do today is just go around and share what dinner actually looks like in our homes, since most of us have one or two littles, and just discuss some strategies that we use as parents. And also, if you guys have any meal ideas that can make dinner easier, I would love to hear what those ideas are. And then by the end of this, I think everyone should have some takeaways that they can pursue their goals and still run a happy, healthy household without dinner becoming this constant source of stress. So let's just start off super simple here. What does dinner time look like in your guys' household right now?
I'll go first. So I have a 3 and a 5-year-old who is currently putting on all of my lip gloss. And so another thing within my family that some people might be able to relate to is my fiance works shift work. So 4 nights of the week, he also is not home for dinner time. So I am in charge of cooking and serving dinner the majority of the nights. Now, we do meal prep every 3 to 4 days, just like I suggest my clients do. And what I typically do for our meal preps is I just keep it really simple with a couple of protein options and a couple of carb options that I just have in the fridge. And we will eat those throughout the day. And we will also have that for dinner if I decide to have, for example, like ground beef, rice, and vegetables or something like that. Or I'll do taco bowls or wraps. So I will pull from that meal prep to create meals for myself and my family. And then there are also some nights where I make a more macro friendly recipe. For example, like if we're doing a chili or if we're doing pizza or if I'm doing homemade chicken strips or whatever it may be. And one thing that I think is really important is that once you are tracking macros and once you become more comfortable and confident with tracking macros, there are endless recipes and endless opportunities when it comes to being able to make a more macro friendly meal that yourself and your whole family can enjoy. So, in terms of my kids and what they eat, they have always eaten the same foods that we do. When they were younger, so then when they were first getting into solids and eating foods, we just started to what we ate right away. I will say we got lucky for the first couple of years where our kids, they just would eat anything and everything. Like they were not picky at all, from like vegetables to meat to like whatever it may be. So I know that that is not the case for everybody. I will say my 5-year-old, kind of once she turned like 4.5, 5, she did start to just become a little bit more aware of foods that she likes and foods that she doesn't like. Now, I think it's really important that we don't just categorize kids as picky eaters. There's a lot of different reasons to why they would be picky eaters. And so I like to get a little bit inquisitive. So, for example, my daughter decided she doesn't like cheese on anything except for pizza. And sometimes it's just a personal preference.
Mhm.
I'm not going to force her to eat something that she does not like, as long as there are other options that I can give her. So, for example, if we do pasta, I just leave the cheese off or I put it on the side or something like that. Another thing that I do if I'm making a meal that is new to my kids is I always try to include some safe foods on their plate. So, something that I know that when they get to the dinner table and they see what's on their plate, they're not going to immediately be like, that's yucky, I don't want to eat it. There's always going to be something that I know they will pick from, whether it be like some fruit or some tortilla chips if I'm doing like a taco bowl or something like that. So in my case, we do eat the same meal. I try to create some more fun meals as well so that my kids aren't just eating chicken, rice, and broccoli. However, sometimes we do eat chicken, rice, and broccoli, and that's fine. And they can tolerate that. But I also remind myself that they are just kids. And sometimes I will get creative and make something that I know that we can all enjoy that is maybe a little bit more kid oriented or kid focused, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I feel like that's very identical to what Haley and I do. We have 2 boys, one is 4 and the other is 1. And we also have kind of like a base meal prep always in the fridge, whether that's like, ground beef or chicken breast, or, some type of protein, and then usually like a lot of rice or potatoes pre-cooked in the fridge. And a lot of the time we'll just kind of take from that throughout the day. But for dinners, especially, like sometimes we'll utilize that meal prep or we'll just make a random dinner, kind of like how Clara does. It's just a different dinner every night, try out a new recipe, maybe a new soup, something like that. And then we make that as well. And then everyone typically has that. We all really, I think, at least in my house, we eat very much the same. The odd caveat here and there. Funny, Walker doesn't like cheese either. So he doesn't have cheese on anything. He actually doesn't even like pizza, which is funny. But and they're also allergic to peanuts. So we all just don't have peanuts usually. But yeah, we usually just always have our just base meal prep in the fridge and we pull from that a lot. And then for dinners, we'll switch it up every now and then. But really, our kids eat very much the same as us, maybe with the odd, preference change here and there for them. But all in all, we eat pretty much the same. And luckily, my kids are not picky whatsoever. So that makes it a lot easier for us. They're okay with eating mostly anything. Maybe they have a lot less than sometimes, but other than that, it's pretty standard. Like I said, very, very much like Clara does.
So I have kind of like a hybrid household situation. I think that you guys have a very similar lifestyle, like with your kids, and between your partners, whereas mine has always been a little bit more of a hybrid, where my partner, up until recently, was working, like 50, 60-hour weeks. So it was very similar to Clara, where it's on me to put serve the food onto the table. Sometimes Jeff was here for dinner, sometimes not. And that presented obviously its own challenges as well. My kids are just about 2 and 4. I introduce solids to them in the same way for each of them. My 2-year-old, she's a great eater. She loves everything. My 4-year-old, ever since he was about 1, things have been just, I will say, a little bit of an ongoing struggle, but we always just try to keep food positive. So I do a lot of what Clara has said, where we pull from our meal prep that's in the fridge, which is usually like 1 to 2 proteins, maybe 1 to 2 carbs that are served. But I always have a safe food for my son to be able to eat at the dinner table so that he's not feeling left out, so that he's not feeling pressured, overstimulated, and honestly, like afraid of food. Because a lot of it for kids is just their environment around the food, and you're just trying to create that positive relationship. So I try not to pressure him too much, and I always have a safe food for him, whether that is buttered toast, whether that is mac and cheese, sometimes it's buttered noodles. And within those safe foods, I also make sure, if we're doing buttered toast, it's whole grain. It's maybe Ezekiel or my mom's homemade bread because he loves that. I'm doing grass-fed butter. I'm doing the things for like me as the parent, so I feel a little bit better about giving him that. One of the staples in our household is the Annie's Super Mac. It is a higher protein version of their mac and cheese. We love mac and cheese. I think like in everyone's household, even kids who don't like cheese, they usually like mac and cheese. So whether sometimes I will make the Annie's Super Mac and then I'll just make some ground beef on the side. And it's like a healthy version of Hamburger Helper, which I think a lot of us grew up with. And it's usually pretty kid friendly. That's a lot of the staples that we use. Right now, we're just really focusing on that positive environment around food. And one thing that I will say too, that's what works for our household as someone who has been, cognizant and aware of their nutrition. And while my partner hasn't always been on the same like level and page as me, he's always been open to it. Whereas a lot of people perhaps joining our program are in a position where like this is a really big lifestyle change for them. So it's also a big lifestyle change, for their family as well. So we talk a lot about, that in relation to your partner. Like, how do I get my partner on the same page as like wanting to eat those foods? And that's one hurdle for people. But then when you do have young kids in the household, that's another hurdle because you can't always sit, a 2-year-old down and explain to them, mommy's in a fitness program. So, we're going to be eating these types of meals. Like, we can definitely, I think, empathize with how this is the struggle for a lot of our clients. So I will say having realistic expectations and probably lowering your expectations a little bit for if you have kids who maybe lean towards the picky side. I think it's more of a spectrum and it can be
Mm,
for a number of different reasons. Make sure that you are focused more so on making it a positive experience for them. And that you're not putting your expectations of what you want it to look like for you onto your family. So what that can look like sometimes is, deconstruct meals so that it makes it more palatable for everyone and easy for you. So whether that's making Annie's mac and cheese and ground beef, maybe doing taco night for the family where everything's separated, they can build their own. Everyone has a safe food that they can add to their taco or their burrito or their quesadilla, however that they want to eat it. And then as everyone starts to build confidence and familiarity with that, which will take time. It's not going to be 1 week. It's probably not going to be 2 weeks, and there'll be ups and downs with it, especially with kids. But they will get more familiar with it, and you will get more confident in being able to layer in what Clara was talking about, where maybe you do like chili night and they're more open to that, to a more like one pot style of meal. But I think that the best way going into it, if it's a big lifestyle change for you and your family, is to simplify things by doing deconstructed meals and just always making sure that there's some version of a safe food for your kids. It's going to benefit them so much more for there to be a safe food and for there to be a positive environment at the dinner table than it would be detrimental for you to feel bad about maybe making something separate for them, is what I'm trying to say. So the benefit of that dinner table being a positive experience is going to yield like way a better experience for your kid than any associated downside of having to, make some buttered toast on the side with that meal. And that's the philosophy and kind of what I've been working on with my family, with kind of, kids that sway on either end. Dinner isn't always a great experience in my household, but we're always doing our best to make it positive, I will say.
I will pick up from there because I have definitely some similarities to Clara's Zach and Carly. But my house also has a little bit of our own flavor as well. And what I want to start with is even just the seasons of what nutrition and dinner time has looked like in my household, because it has not looked the same. So a little bit of backstory and context. I grew up in a fairly traditional Italian household. So dinner at the table was a staple. It was very important. And as I transitioned into motherhood, that's also something I really strived to uphold because it was just part of my values. And it's something I was able to uphold for a time. And then life started to change and it started to become really challenging, really exhausting, and really unsustainable for me to get dinner on the table every single night. So that is something that I have had the routine of. And what that looked like when that was part of my routine was meal planning for the week. Having a plan for every single dinner, what that would look like, and aiming for meals that the whole family would like, whether they were eating it as is or it was getting a little more deconstructed, because that's often what things are looking like for kids and their nutrition, is that it's the same staples, it's just getting a little deconstructed, and their palate does change over time as well. So that's what things initially looked like. And then as things have shifted, and now that we're in this season of life where there's kids' activities, there is 2 parents that train through the week, the evenings are quite busy, and it's just not realistic for us to sit at the table Monday through Friday and have dinner as a family. But we do that on the weekend, and it's something that we look forward to and we enjoy, and it feels special. So that's really nice that I still have that, but things have now been blended in a way that is more sustainable for me. So what meal prep looks like through that Monday to Friday of kind of getting through the busyness of the week with activities, etc. I do meal prep every 3 to 4 days approximately. Those meals typically me and my hubby are taking. So we are having 2 prepped meals every single day. And then I always have staples prepped in the fridge as well. So base carb sources, base protein sources. I've now just started meal prepping more for my kids. My kids are 8 and 9. So they're now at that point where they are more independent and they want to be more independent. And something I think about in my parenthood is what it actually felt like to be a kid. And you know what I really remember? I remember craving independence and autonomy. And I think in childhood, it kind of feels like we're just doing what everyone tells us all the time. And it's exhausting. So I want to be able to create some space for my kids to have that choice and to have that autonomy. And I find it something that just creates a little bit more cohesiveness overall. And they feel like part of the team versus me just kind of telling them how it is. And I can see them really enjoying having things prepped in the fridge that they can then have the independence to go heat up and to get that ready on their own. So the things that I have been prepping for them, base protein sources. So things like some taco beef, some chicken. So things that I'm still utilizing in our meal prep, but again, kind of like paring it down. And the kids are always welcome to take the meals that I have prepped. And sometimes they do. My daughter will eat pretty much exactly what we eat. She is not a picky eater. Her nutrition looks really similar to mine, honestly. She will make protein oats in the morning for herself. She loves things like a chicken Caesar salad wrap. Like she has a really diverse palate. Where my son is a whole different thing. Now, we are a neurodivergent household. So my son is ADHD. So that is also going to be a factor. And when you have neurodivergent kids or humans in general, then you're going to have other things like someone with autism may really crave a lot of repetition, a lot of sameness. It's something that helps them regulate their nervous system, just eating similar foods. And then you may have some other sensory sensitivities. You may have individuals that have really limited safe foods. And at the end of the day, what matters most is that we hold how it looks. I feel it's something we can refine over time. But I think the age old saying of fed is best, that's what matters most. And I also want to create a lot of positivity around health and fitness in general. And I see that carrying over into where my kids are now. They're now at the age where they're reflecting behaviors back to me of just, they are making aligned choices organically because they have also seen how it makes them feel, how eating a balanced meal makes them feel, that they have energy, fueling before a training session or cross country or hockey, and how that makes them feel. And more than anything, that's what I want them to have. I want them to have a knowledge base. I want them to know how habits carry over into making them feel and their energy. And what I've always focused on is that education piece of explaining a little bit more, and that some foods are going to be more focused on fueling and being nutrient dense. And some foods, maybe we eat more for the lived experience and for the yummies, and that's okay. And my kids are also now at the age as well where they know their macro sources. So that's where that autonomy piece comes in, that they know my standard is that we're going to aim for a balanced meal, but how that looks is where they get to have some independence. Okay, if you don't want chicken as your protein source, then what about eggs? What about some taco beef? My son, one of the things he will eat on repeat is taco beef. So we typically have that in the fridge on a weekly basis, right? And I'll do it in little containers so that he can either make tacos if he wants tacos. Maybe my daughter wants to make taco salad. So we have those staples. My kids at the age of 8 and 9 can decide for themselves what protein source they want, what carb source they want. So that's also really cool to see how that groundwork is carrying over into them having their own independence.
I feel like we're kind of like in the beginning stages. You guys all have like a little bit older kids, toddler stage or a little bit older. We're kind of in that. Our baby's he's only 8 months, so he's only started eating solids a couple months ago. So this is all new to us, and just listening to all of you guys talk so far, I'm like already know what we're gonna do now. So this is helpful for me too. But what we've done so far, Logan's been doing a lot of meal prep for him. We do our own meal prep, just standard, everything that you guys have said. I'll echo again, like the chicken, the ground beef, the rice, all that stuff prepped in the fridge. But for Caleb, what Logan has done, a lot of has done. She's done like some banana pancakes. She'll make a bunch of like tiny little ones and then she'll freeze it. So we just kind of have a stock of it. She'll make a bunch of like, she got these like ice cube trays and she'll put some sweet potato in there, freeze it. So then it's kind of like a little sweet potato puck. And then so she'll serve that to him as well. So there's all these like new things that we're learning along the way. But at the same time, we're introducing foods to him that we typically eat as well. Like we'll eat sweet potato, we'll eat these banana pancakes or whatever. It's all these foods that we would typically eat as well. We're not really introducing different or foreign things just yet. Again, we don't really see the need for that just yet, eventually down the road. But right now, we're keeping things pretty stable and pretty simple as he just gets used to the solid foods. One thing that we started doing as well when he started eating solids, just listening to all of you talk about how, you know, how important it is to have a positive environment around the dinner table. Before we had him, or when he was just a little baby, we would typically eat dinner in front of the TV because it was just Logan and I. But now we've been trying to make a very conscious effort to actually eat at the table. And so that when Caleb is in his high chair with us, we're all kind of like eating at the table. So that's also something we've been trying to be better at and implement, is just starting to create that environment around the dinner table. But yeah, that's kind of what dinner looks like at our house right now.
So I'm the one person in this call that doesn't have kids yet. So I have a little bit of a different perspective of what dinner time looks like. But I am in a stage of life where I am bodybuilding. So my diet and my nutrition looks different from most people. I'm focused on like food as fuel. And so yes, I like my meals to taste good. That's important still. But I'm really focused on the idea of food as fuel, and I have like specific meal times throughout the day. But my partner, Nate, is not a bodybuilder. He plays lacrosse, so he's an athlete. So he does understand like the importance of fuel and all that kind of stuff, but we don't eat the same meals. So one thing that we both do that's very similar to every single person on this call is meal prep, obviously, but we're both big like ingredient prep people. So one of the things that's like the best thing I ever did as a bodybuilder is I batch prep my protein. So I'll pre-cook like a whole bunch of it, like 3 weeks to 4 weeks worth of protein in one go, and I'll freeze a whole bunch of it. So all I have to do is pull it out, and it saves me so much time. So we're big like batch prep people. So we have separate ingredients and we have separate quantities because Nate likes like full fat cheese and flavored yogurts and higher fat beef, and he has a very he's more like sensitive digestion as well, so he's very particular about where he gets food from, whereas I'm like, let me get 4 flats of chicken breast from Costco. you know so our foods look a little bit different, but what I think it really boils down to for the two of us is quality time. So dinner for us, regardless of what we're eating, it becomes more about that time that we spend together. So yeah, Greg, like we do sometimes eat in front of the TV if we're like watching our show, but we're very particular about when we do have meals together, we like put our phones away. The focus is on each other and having that quality time together. And like one of the phrases I like to use all the time is people focused, not food focused. So the same thing goes when I'm having meals with like my parents. If I'm going to my parents' house for a meal, the idea is that we're spending time together. So like I've been on bodybuilding preps and I went over for Thanksgiving dinner and I didn't eat any of the food for Thanksgiving because I was like 2 weeks out from show. So I just made sure that I structured my meal timing that day around getting that time with them, because that's ultimately more important to me than exactly what we're eating. Like, I don't know, 15 years down the line, I'm not going to look back and be like, oh, I had chicken and asparagus that one year. I'm going to look back and say like, no, like I love that I still got to spend time with my family. So those are kind of things that I focus on in my stage of life. But I actually do want to follow up on something that Carly talked about, is that the idea of like changing your habits and changing your nutrition does have an impact on the people around you. So I remember when I first started bodybuilding, it took a while for other people in my life to kind of come around. And so I think giving the people in your life grace as you're changing habits is really important too. So having those like deconstructed meal things are helpful for the sake of everybody being able to pull foods and have those things together, but also like knowing that adjustments take time. It can't happen all at once. And a lot of it comes from expressing like why it's important to you and helping people understand the thought process behind your decisions, not just like, I want to lose some weight or I want to gain some muscle, so I'm going to eat this way. Like, that's part of the reason, but like, what's your deeper why behind it? And so, like, explaining that deeper why to the people in your life kind of helps them understand, like, oh, okay, I get it. This is why this contributes to that. And then giving them grace to understand, like, they don't necessarily have to hop right on board right away, but then it also gives you the opportunity to educate the people in your life as well. Once I was able to like educate my parents, especially because they knew nothing about bodybuilding. I was lucky in that I grew up in a household where nutrition was like a big focus for our family. So we always made sure we had vegetables at meals. There was protein. There was like a decent carb source. We were well fed for all of our sports and things like that. So I was lucky in growing up in a household that prioritized nutrition, but it does look different a little bit. So I was able to educate them. And then now, anytime my dad texts me and he says, "Hey, Pumpkin, like we're having dinner, I'll have a steak ready for you." I'm like, perfect. So they've like hopped on board after time because they know like what my food preferences are and they just want that time with me. And then the same kind of goes for like friends and Nate as well. So I think that that's really helpful.
I think one of the most positive things that you can do for your kids is have them see you cook and have that be normal. And it's almost less about what you're actually cooking. Like that's something that can be refined over time, but have cooking and meal prep be normalized. And that is something that I see in my clients as well, that can be the hardest hurdle if they come into the program and they have this belief that I don't cook. And we want to be able to see cooking the same way that we do doing laundry, cleaning the bathroom, like doing these basic things and seeing it that way. And if you do have those beliefs of I hate cooking, I don't cook, whatever that may be, being able to just be curious around it. But even just having your kids see you cook, having cooking at home being normalized, that alone is such a powerful thing. Now, I am someone that meal preps a lot. I love nutrition. I love cooking. And part of that comes from my upbringing. And we really didn't eat out growing up, maybe once a month, but it was something very minimal. But if we've grown up in a house where eating out really frequently is the norm, it gets that much more challenging to change that as like a lifestyle and a habit, and even just build a new idea of what normal is, because our upbringing really does kind of like lay that foundation of what we perceive as the norm. And then as adults, we start reframing and refining and deciding, okay, what are we going to keep from our upbringing and what are we going to do a little bit differently?
I also think what's really important about that as well is that people overcomplicate the idea of cooking. They think that cooking means I have to have this elaborate 7-step, 12 ingredient recipe. When really, if you like kind of what you talked about, breaking down, like my kids understand what those core macros are. Like if you have some core pieces, I think people underestimate how much you can dress up a meal with like seasoning, sauces, and a couple different toppings. So like when you have those base foundations, you don't have to overcomplicate it. You don't have to spend 2 hours on like a huge thing. It can be simple and you can dress it up quite easily. So I think that's really important to keep in mind too.
Cooking is a life skill, and the sooner people accept that and realize it, the better. And the overcomplication of how we eat is so real. And so many people struggle with that. And it's one of those things that comes around because, you look down the street of restaurants, there's an Indian restaurant, there's a Mexican restaurant. So we have this expectation that, like, if I'm cooking at home, I got to hit every continent in the span of a calendar week. And like, it's just not going to happen. And that's where you're going to be like spinning your wheels with that expectation on yourself. When in reality, like Maddie just said, switching up the seasonings, switching up the sauces, keeping it simple helps everyone else around you. And I think what you were talking about too, with just experiencing friction in your life, whether that's from a partner, whether that's from kids, like when it is a lifestyle change for everyone involved, is just, expecting that to take time. And one thing that I've always told my clients, especially when there's like adult relationships, that there's maybe some friction with you making this lifestyle change, is you cannot necessarily expect people to understand right away. But within those relationships, you should be able to expect their respect. So if you just ask for that and then lead by example, especially as a parent, but even as a partner, because I can say that too, Maddie, like my relationship, similar to yours, especially in the early years of Jeff and I being together. When I started bodybuilding, he was like, what is this? Like, are we going out for a date night soon? Like, what is going on? It was definitely a transition for him where he was like, are we drinking at the concert tonight? And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
That's not what things are going to look like, right? But I continued to do what I was doing. I didn't expect him to join in on it on
Yeah.
the level that I was at. And over the years, he has slowly changed his habits as well. And it's the same thing with your kids. Like Emily was just saying, when you're cooking at home, setting that example that like, we got food at home. Like, we're going to cook at home. Mom's or dad or the whole family is going to be involved in making this healthy meal. Create curiosity for them, create interest. And, this can go the same way with adult relationships as well. Like, there isn't that huge of a difference between children and adults, let's be real. But by leading by example, it trickles down to exactly what Emily is experiencing now, where, it's been like 3-4 years of you being like really intentional about your nutrition. Your kids have gone through that developmental phase from, that 5 to 10-year-old where they're more independent now. They've clocked it. They've seen mom and dad do this for a few years, and now they're kind of starting to follow in your footsteps in the same way. And that can definitely translate to adult relationships as well as kids. And it's just having that patience and understanding that within a lifestyle change, there is going to be progress that you might not see until years down the road. But if you are consistent and you stay true, you will see it.
Yeah, I can relate to a lot of what you guys have already shared. And I wanted to say, I grew up in a really small town. We didn't have a lot of restaurants. So we ate a lot at home. My mom cooked everything, and we weren't really involved with cooking. So it was a very traditional format for all of our food. Like, my mom would prep everything. She'd make us breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'd get hot meals delivered at school. Like, I didn't even have to put the meal together myself. So this really backfired because when I went to university, I had no idea how to cook anything. Like, I think the only thing I knew how to cook was eggs and rice. And then I was ordering out so much takeout, Panago, Domino's, going out to like Kelly O'Brien's, getting Pacho's, Boston Pizza, just spending so much money eating out. And I didn't learn how to actually meal prep until I was like 23 years old. Along with this, I was also a super picky eater growing up. I only liked rice and meat. I didn't like any vegetables. So knowing how I was when I was younger, I tried to make the experience of eating a lot more enjoyable, and also try to include my kids when prepping meals nowadays, because they're going to be able to pick up skills, be able to utilize when they're older. Even last night, we made 3 separate meals. Dinner time looks different day to day. Sometimes we're eating all the same thing, just different portion sizes. The other nights, we're making separate meals. I think the biggest benefit of this is because we know how to track our food, because I have a stronger understanding of nutrition, we're able to adjust based on what the circumstances are for that night. If we're really busy, it might be a frozen pizza, but then we're adding more protein to that pizza and then adding veggies and some fruit on the side. We're trying to include protein in every single meals. This is something that we continue to navigate as our kids get older. It's going to change. And I think as long as we have that skill set and we're able to make adjustments based on what is in the fridge, what we've got in the pantry, we can always make something work.
I'm curious to know what your guys' take is on snacks, because I know I've worked with many people who tend to have a lot of snacks in their house because their kids like a lot of snacks, and they also tend to dig into those snacks. Now, for us personally, at our house, we generally, Haley would call it an ingredient household. We generally don't have much for snacks, and if we do, it's very focused, like they're always very healthy, but strictly for the kids. Like we buy snacks that we don't typically buy snacks for ourselves because we know that like that's just a hindrance to our diet and our progress. But for the kids, we want to get them things like maybe some organic bars or like granola bars or maybe, applesauce packets or a little fruit in a cup or something like that. Things that we don't typically have. So we're never tempted by their snacks, but still gives a little option for the kids to switch things up, maybe have a little snack. But in our house, yeah, like buying snacks generally is not something that we do. And just generally because it throws everyone off of their diet for the most part. And if we do buy snacks, it's very seldom, typically for if we're having company over, things like that. But I'm curious what you guys do in the snack department, because I know like anyone with kids, we're talking snacks at some point.
I will
That's
tap
it.
in on this. So we don't have a ton of snacks, but we still have snacks. Absolutely still have snacks. And I'm a big believer that there is time and place for everything, especially being in the season of life where there's kids' activities. Before an activity, they may have their balanced meal, but then they may have an extra snack for a little bit of quicker energy going into that activity. So my daughter on Mondays has back-to-back dance. So an example of what she took to have in between, she took some fruit. She did take an applesauce pack, and then she took a bar, which was like a little bit more of a convenient snack. So it's primarily carbohydrates to kind of get that energy for the next class. So again, I'm a big believer, time and place for everything. And me being a runner as well, I actually need to have convenient snacks in the house so I can take that on my run. And I am currently going through a phase in my running where like I am just not feeling the gels. It's like it's a sensory thing right now for me. So what that looks like to take some fuel on my runs, things like a banana, things like maybe some dried mango, maybe a Rice Krispie square, maybe gummies. So again, these are snacks and these are what many individuals may perceive as bad food. I disagree. We can look at it in a different way and look at this as a strategic carb transport system. And this is why context does matter. So in our house, we have snacks. They're not all the organic granola bars. I still have goldfish. I still have kid foods, but my kids have learned the time and place for that. And they know that that doesn't take the place for their meal, that they're having a meal, that we're prioritizing a balanced protein forward meal, but we still do have those snacks. And then with Memphis being ADHD, and he's also on medication as well, which can suppress appetite. And that's also another challenge that some parents have, that their kids are on medications that are now adding just another layer of complexity, that it is killing their appetite. They don't want to eat. In those situations, what matters most is getting calories in, whether it's chocolate milk, whether it's goldfish, whatever it may be. It's really important for those kids to be getting caloric intake and not having them be underweight and then having impact to their health there. And that is something that for children that are on medication, they are also having their weight monitored just to make sure that that caloric intake is where it needs to be. So just adding a few different layers there.
I 1,000% like 2000s was the epitome of growing up in a ingredient household. I think there was always goldfish for when we would have tomato soup at random, but it was like unsalted tortilla chips. Sometimes we would have Triscuits. That was cool. Never breakfast cereal. Like it was like if you wanted something, you were making a sandwich. You had to make it. Whereas Jeff, he grew up in like the snack house. Like there was candy, there was pop, there was chips, there was like everything under the sun that he wanted. And he had full access to it at all times. And I think that that both affected our way of eating as we grew up in a really interesting way. But then as we came together, you know, created a family as a household, there was some clashing there because, you know, Jeff really wanted to sway towards like having a lot of snacks in the house. And then once our kids got to this like toddler age, where like I think what Zach is talking about, like this chapter of life for us, having a lot of snacks in the house is a lot of drama. So we have a lock on our pantry cupboard because while we do have snacks, because, you know, my kids go to care, so we, you know, we have the organic like fruit bars, granola bars, you know, the different, sometimes it's fishy crackers, sometimes we do like the Annie's crackers. We definitely have snacks in the house for the kids, but they absolutely do not have free reign over when they have those snacks at this stage, because as a 2 and a 4-year-old, as much as we're trying to, you know, create independent positivity around eating, we were also finding that access to the snack cupboard was creating a lot of frustrations around dinner time because, you know, when everyone comes home, you know, from care at the end of the day, we're trying to get dinner ready, that like between 4 to 5 p.m. witching hour that happens where they're wanting snacks, and then, you know, we try to do whatever like a sit down dinner will look like for your family. Sometimes it means we're sitting in the living room on the living room floor. Sometimes we're at the dinner table, we're just trying to have it as a family. But if the kids have eaten a snack too close to dinner, they're not interested in eating dinner. So like for this phase with us, we have, you know, the necessary snacks that we need when we're running out the door, that we're adding to their lunches when they go to preschool type thing. But we're not quite at the point where it's like independent access to having snacks.
Even my kids, like they'll ask, oh, can I have a snack? Oh, no, we're going to do dinner soon. So like they do check in with me and we'll kind of decision make together. So the snacks are there, but they don't take the place of a balanced meal. And I feel like that's the most important piece. And even just kind of having balance, hey, can I have a snack? And of course, kids are going to kind of gravitate towards like a snack bar. I'm like, you can have a piece of fruit. And like, that's your option in this moment. So again, kind of creating that balance. I think having total free reign over snacks and snack cupboard, etc. I agree. It can create a barrier, and it's not that we're restricting, it's that we're creating structure and giving them guidance.
I had one other thing that I wanted to add too, and this likens a lot to what Emily is experiencing, especially if you have kids that have sensory issues or you're, you know, some version of neurodivergence in the household. But the snacks can become like big drama in that sense, because young kids, as they're developing, even if they don't have sensory issues, like they will always gravitate to what is consistent for them. So you think like snack bars are always the same. Every time you open the package, it's the exact same thing. So that creates this like safeness and consistency for them. And if that's happening too frequently, we noticed that there was a lack of willingness then to explore like whole foods, you know, berries, where like, you know, one berry tastes sweet, the next berry is sour. So we're starting to create these sensory kind of like fears around foods when we have access to too much free reign around the snack items, because I think young kids will always gravitate towards those. Like Emily said, like, oh, a snack bar, easy. Even as adults, we tend to, but when you've got young kids, the snacks for multiple different reasons can be a little bit of drama, and you want to be a little bit more intentional about like when you're using them and what the access looks like.
Yeah,
From
we have snacks in our house pretty much all the time. Some of them are homemade. So like Megan will make banana muffins, chocolate chip cookies. And then we also buy snacks, but we try to always buy snacks that have less preservatives in them, buying more organic ones. But then whenever our kids do ask for snacks, we'll always say something like, ask us after dinner or ask me after you finish your meal, because then at least they're getting a balanced meal before having that snack. And then sometimes they forget about the snack or they're too full to eat it.
I was going to say, from a grown-up perspective, like Nate is a huge snacker. And obviously in my phase of life as a bodybuilder, like I'm not just like sitting there pounding back like Sour Patch Kids. And so I really like what Emily said, and Dawn kind of touched on it earlier, but there's like a phrase that's like, eat what you want, add what you need, that I really like. And so it's the idea of you can have the Annie's mac and cheese, or you can have the Sour Patch Kids, or it's not that you can or can't have certain foods. It's just if you say, I can't have any chocolate, and then you go have like a bar and something else and something else and something else. Whereas if you had just had a couple squares of chocolate, but also had it with like some Greek yogurt and some berries, you would have a positive relationship with the chocolate that you wanted to eat. And then you would also have things to go along with it to help with like keeping you full and keeping you satiated. So you kind of hit all those things there. And then the other thing that I think people need to recognize with that as well is a little from like the grown-up perspective is delayed gratification as well. Like you've probably tasted what a granola bar tastes like in your life. Like that granola bar is not going anywhere. If you really want that granola bar, awesome. You can have that granola bar, but maybe just save it for a time that's more constructive, or save it for the next day when you can fit that into your plan a little bit easier and not just be like, okay, well, I'm just going to gobble up this granola bar because it's right there right now. So those are kind of like my 2 cents with that, is making sure that you have it with other things that support you. And then also recognizing that foods aren't bad. It's more just about when it fits right for you.
Okay. Well, I think we talked a lot about the different strategies already just by sharing our own experiences. And I think some meal ideas have come up. So, with that being said, I'm going to wrap it up here. I think the main takeaway here is that it's less about having like perfectly matched plates, but it's more about creating that positive environment that feels less stressful at the dinner time, and still finding ways to be able to adjust while still moving towards your goals. So if we can help our clients understand that they don't have to choose between their goals and having a peaceful dinner with their family, I think that's a big win. So hope you guys enjoyed this one. If you guys have any other questions, let us know in the comments. Other than that, we'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.